Imagine if you had 9 minutes to describe the universe or the world that we live in. Imagine how tough it would be if you were trying to explain to a school of fish the history of the ocean or the world that they're swimming in, that they're moving in, they're living and dying in. It's kind of what I feel like right now. We're going to zoom in a little bit from the history of the universe just to the mere history of the world that we kind of dwell in. I kind of think of it as, some would call it the American dream, some would call it a suburban nation. I call it autopia. And we're going to talk about this move from autopia to Portlandia. The American dream started with kind of this simple idea that we're made in the image of God and that we might join him in his work of creation, that we might be able to carve out and create a little bit of life, liberty, and happiness on our own, that we could do this together and kind of create the city on a hill that actually might be a model for the world to see. With the dream was going along pretty swimmingly till about the Great Depression. We kind of started losing some faith in that dream. Have any of you heard of the 1939 World of Tomorrow? People actually went to the biggest spectacle ever produced at that time. The Shanghai World Expo just surpassed it, 70 million people in 6 months. But at this World of Tomorrow, a vision of the future was presented that was bought hook, line, and sinker. It was presented by General Motors. It was called Futurama. And what it did, this was this epic Disney-level e-ticket attraction where people were taken on this amazing journey, this ride, this kind of Peter Pan's flight over the future of America, in which there was no more cities and farms. There was this kind of, again, autopia, this kind of suburban landscape where the car would be our magic carpet ride to this future. Freeways would basically obliterate space and time. We could have our Married with Children, Leave It to Beaver, white picket fence dream and still do our jobs, have all the functions of the city decentralized throughout the region. How'd that work out for us? This is the neighborhood I moved to when I kind of grew up as a military brat in Europe and Germany. We landed back in the States in Sandy Springs, Georgia, to the American dream here. And I was actually pretty excited about this. I remember specifically griping to my parents that I'm an American citizen, but I've never lived in America. So we up and moved to the States. This is kind of the arterial commercial corridor that sits outside of our suburban single-family detached tract. I'm not going to spend a lot of time boring you with the design criticisms of suburban sprawl. But the reality is this is, again, the space that most of us are living in. And this is pretty much the dream that we bought, that we paid for, that we willingly said, hey, we'll write a blank check. We'll spend trillions of dollars we'll pay the government trillions of dollars in taxes, to build these, quote, freeways, mortgage credits, home ownership tax credits. And at the end of the day, what we're left with today in most of the country is this environment that some would say is environmentally, economically, socially, spiritually impoverished. It's not the way that humans have lived throughout thousands of years of human existence. It's not the way that billions of people live, the majority of people outside of our continent live today. It's actually a pretty foreign concept. This is actually kind of the environment that I kind of grew up in. This is kind of just a European kind of a Noli map. At the middle of kind of this grid of streets, it's actually scaled to human scale, is kind of this cross. That was actually just a Roman basilica, the city hall of the day, that got Christianized, so they added the transept, the cross. So now what you have in the middle of this kind of rat's maze is a cross, and at the foot of the cross is this communal gathering place, the piazza, the third place of the community. And again, throughout human history, people have had this option, that first place of home, second place work, but a third place where you could kind of do life together outside of just your nuclear family. Something happened around World War II in America. We basically not only forgot how to do this, we actually outlawed and outzoned it with our focus on the modern autopia city. What we did about 10 years ago is I launched a group called Visionary Studios with a couple of the top urban designers, graphic designers, interior designers, and we said, look, we want to kind of help join God, and we want to join God in this work of recreating, renewing, redeeming place and space. So we launched Visionary Studios, and it's been kind of an interesting ride. Kind of the mission statement is pretty simple. designing and developing destinations that lift the spirit now and forever. And that's taken a lot of different forms along the way. There's traditional sacred space here. But a lot of our work, we've been kind of drinking out of a fire hydrant with this idea of urban design intervention and retrofitting suburbia and kind of fixing kind of this mess that we've inherited. This is your typical, this isn't design. This is what the standard operating procedure in America gets you. This is standard zoning, standard building codes, parking requirements, so on and so forth, where they've taken the pizza of community, blown it up, stacked the pepperoni in one pile, the cheese in one pile, the dough in one pile, meaning they've taken that rich vertical mixed use and they've separated the commercial districts, the strip malls from the single-family residential, from the multifamily apartments, so on and so forth. This is what it looks like when you actually go in and you think, how have people lived for thousands of years? Again, mixed-use, walkable urbanity. This doesn't have to be on Manhattan. It can actually be just about anywhere. The idea of thinking about spaces between buildings and thinking about streets not just for how many vehicles you can throughput per second or per hour, but actually as living spaces, as public spaces where you could actually experience what we had in the Greek Agora, where someone could actually practice freedom of speech or freedom of religion or gathering in the temple courts. Of course, Portland's been an amazing national benchmark. It actually sparked a movement that's really kind of a renewal of urbanism, of urbanity. And the cool thing about it is it's not just one district. This is really a vision of a new way of thinking about a postmodern, post-Christian regional city, where they've actually taken, originally it was just 1,000 Friends, a volunteer group, that cast an alternative vision of what would it look like if we didn't follow standard operating procedure? What would it look like if we actually took the time to intentionally design an entire region? What if we took, they didn't use these words, but what if we took God's architecture, the natural landscape, the mountains, the streams, the valleys, and what if we actually established an urban growth boundary that still accommodated 20 years of growth and development, but what if we focus development on extensions of the existing urban core and along light rail transit lines, and we created these kind of string of pearls with these walkable mixed-use transit urban villages. This is one of my favorite spots in the city. We'll, if we do the design tour with me tomorrow, we'll hit this, Jameson Square. Again, wonderful little redemption of a vacant lot. This is kind of a little urban beach here in the Pearl District. There's Tanner Springs, another great space. This is one of the outlying far western suburbs, if you will. It's really done as a walkable mixed-use transit village. This is Orenco Station, where a friend of mine actually planted a church called Our Place a few years back and is doing great. And the great thing about this stuff is you don't have to build an ocean of parking that sits empty 6.5 days a week to have church. You can actually use all the transit park and ride lots and walk down. Instead of doing your own little Christian coffee house, they've actually got the Starbucks on the corner. The background of the firm, I'm going to talk about the macro scale and then zoom in. One of my design partners did reintroduce the concept of the garden in the city in Kuala Lumpur with the master plan. This is an urban village in Orange County, California, another one in LA. The unique thing about this one is it's anchored by 2 anchors, an NFL stadium as well as a 3,000-seat performing arts center that also doubles as a church venue. This is the Saddleback campus. This has been the standard suburban model. We've had a pretty poor theology of place and bad eschatology in America. I think we've got to take some blame as Christians that, we've had this eschatology that says, hey, it's all going to burn, so let's just get her done. Let's put up the cheapest thing we can possibly put up, the ugliest piece of crap, and where we live, work, worship, play. Saddleback took, hey, we need 100 acres to do one land use, a few hours on one day a week, and so let's put one building on one end of the property, another building on the opposite end, and what we're doing is now retrofitting that into a vibrant community, mixed-use Main Street for a suburban area that never had one. In Washington, D.C. on Capitol Hill, Mark Batterson's place, we've just got a half of a city block, but we're creating a vertical mixed-use arts center that has 2 arts theaters and a children's center. Retrofitting Kmarts and warehouses across the country. This is Elevation Church. But I want to close out and just talk about the idea of communities have always thrived around sacred spaces and temples, but they've also thrived around water and wells. And you've always had these community gathering places, these third places, piazzas around the town wells. Some of us architects, some of us Christians are called to be church planners and pastors and build churches and temples. I would challenge a number of us that our calling isn't to be temple designers or builders, but actually to be well diggers, to actually create these postmodern wells, to provide both living water. But if you think about that Samaritan woman that never would have made it to Jerusalem, never would have made it to the outer court, the inner court, much less the holiest of holies. That didn't stop the God of the universe for busting through the cosmos, through space and time to reach her where she was at, just trying to get a cup of clean water or a bucket of clean water, to connect with her. So to create these environments where people are anyways just going to perform a daily transaction, get a cup of coffee, get some water, and to actually create an environment where they can actually, in a postmodern, post-Christian culture, experience eternal words of truth for the first time in their life, meet a pinky on the body of Christ for the first time in life. I think that's the challenge that we all have.